Hi, I'm Crystal.
And I'm Karin.
And I'm Owain Yeoman. And you're listening to the Rom-Com Detectives. Doesn't it sound even better in a British accent?
It does. It does. Thank you. You add so much to it. Welcome to Rom-Com Detectives, episode 14, a very special episode in our Mentalist Unit. Just a quick spoiler warning for our listeners, the following episode does reveal the identity of Red John, so proceed at your own risk. Today, Karin and I are so happy to welcome actor and legendary typist Owain Yeoman. Hi, Owain.
Hi, guys. Lovely to meet you both.
So it's a real pleasure to have you on. So I introduced you as a legendary typist because when you did the AMA earlier this year, everyone was freaking out over how fast your answers were coming out.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
Well, you know, I run an ed tech company as well, so clearly that's increased my typing speed. But how funny! I'll put that on the resume, I guess. Speed typer.
Yeah. Okay, so here on Rom-Com Detectives, we of course know you as Agent Wayne Rigsby from The Mentalist, but you've also starred on shows such as Emergence and Turn, Washington Spies, and more recently you had a guest appearance on Bosch Legacy and Tracker.
That's right, yeah.
So I wanted to ask about Bosch Legacy because I'm a big Bosch fan. So the series just came to an end, and you played Jeremy McKee, who turns out to be the serial killer who preyed on the girls from Harry's desk all the way from the pilot. So I really liked that you were in the episode that tied everything together for Harry. But I also wanted to note that given that your character's victims went all the way back to the beginning, that kind of made you Harry Bosch's Red John.
It's so funny you say that. I literally just described that the other day, and I used those exact terms. I said I love Bosch. I love the original series. Bosch Legacy is awesome. I'm sure Ballad will be equally fantastic. Maggie's a phenomenal actress. I think it's always strange when you come into something and your sort of contribution to it on the day feels very small, but in the story becomes very major. So,
Yeah.
you know, I have a number of neighbors who are just mad about Bosch. They love it. And they took great pleasure running around and saying, I saw you as the bad guy. You were the bad guy, the bad guy. And I was like, oh, right. So that is always funny to sort of get your head around. I remember on The Mentalist, we had no idea who Red John was. Bruno tells us that he knew all along, but and I guess he'll be the only one who ever really knows that. But I do wonder about when you come in as an actor to something, how that feels to sort of suddenly take on such an importance. When I was only there really for about 3 days. So, but it was a great 3 days. Had a lot of fun doing it.
And that's what I was wondering was that, it's been that Bosch went on for so long. There's like 20 books and 10 seasons of the show. And how did it feel like to come in at the end?
It's a strange feeling, especially when, there's a lot of emotions there. They had a big sort of cast and crew gathering, a really tight-knit group of people, and I can relate to that. I know how that feels. After 7 years and change on The Mentalist, it was such an emotional time to leave a show like that behind when you've spent 7 years with those people, and quite honestly, you see them more than your family. You're in every day, 14, 15-hour days. So I really related to that, and I could see the camaraderie and the love and the sadness that a chapter was coming to an end, and the excitement for them that it was going to open up to a new chapter. But yeah, it's part of what we do, I guess. As an actor, you come in, you sort of, I'm very used to being the person who doesn't know anyone and starting and sort of fitting in every single time you start a new job. It's a new bunch of friends to make. So yeah, they were a lovely bunch of people, really proud to have been part of that show, and just a real honor to play a bad guy that had so much input. I seem to be in my bad guy era right now. It's a lot more fun to play bad guys, so I'm into it.
Yeah, because you were the bad guy in Tracker too.
I know. It's, the last few roles I've played have all been villains and billionaires. So I'm not mad at the latter. I'm hoping that if art can translate its way into life, that might manifest. But, I'm not sure about the villain side. I've never been much of a villain, but it sure is fun to play them.
So I had heard rumors on Reddit that the production found out that season 3 was going to be the last season while they were filming the last episode. So is there any truth to that? Like, did they actually find out while they were filming the last episode?
I couldn't tell you that. That might be something that happened, but it certainly didn't trickle down to me. I think as far as I could see from my work on it, certainly by the time I came in, which was towards the very end, they already seemed to know that was going to be, handing over now to the new show. But yeah, it was wonderful to be part of. Anytime you're part of a milestone event, I was lucky enough to be on Elementary's 100th episode. And it's always nice to dip in and have those milestone moments with someone else. And even if it's not your own show, to share in their happiness and their success.
So, is there any chance you're going to be on Ballard? Because sometimes they bring prisoners back from while they're in jail, right?
It was a little bit uncertain as to what happens to Jeremy's character. Usually it's when you're sort of bad guy of the week, it ends pretty emphatically, and that usually means that you die. So, I've had a healthy sort of array of on-screen deaths. I think Jeremy's just headed for a long time to prison. Now, whether that might be, I know that it's the kind of show that likes to weave threads back into new series. I know they did that with Bosch into Bosch Legacy. I certainly wouldn't be mad at coming back. It's a wonderful, wonderful show. I would be more than happy to return on that.
Now, I'm a Bosch newbie, and I just watched the first couple seasons, and then I skipped ahead and watched your episode. So I was watching it kind of with my mentalist lens on.
I love you. I just clocked your T-shirt. Oh my goodness, that's amazing! I didn't even notice that. That makes me so happy. Can I get one of those? I so want that. That is
she
actually.
Said she made it.
You made that?
She made it.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible! Like literally, you are wearing a shirt of probably my favorite moment from the series.
Yeah,
I'm not going to skip ahead too much, but working with Tim was probably the single greatest pleasure of working on The Mentalist. He is, I don't know if you've had the chance to chat with him. Obviously, I'd be more than happy to introduce you guys. He is a phenomenal human being, amazing actor, and Cho and Rigsby together, our Chigsby scenes, we used to call them. That big gulp moment was probably up there with my top 3 favorite moments in the show. So thank you for making that. That makes me really happy.
Sure. Thanks for noticing.
So did you guys have to practice the timing on that? Because you guys sipped very simultaneously.
Tim and I were just kind of in sync, especially comedically. And I think people really underestimate how funny Tim is, because he was so deadpan as Cho.
Yeah.
That's really not who he is. People would say to me, oh, does Tim ever smile? I'm like, all the time. In fact, it's far more of an act of acting for him to be able to be that solemn, because he's not that guy. He's not solemn and stoic. He plays it brilliantly, and continue to do so, I think, into Magnum as well. But the Tim I know is very, very upbeat and very, very funny. And so, yeah, we loved having those kind of moments. Any silly little slapstick stuff we could get in there.
Love it. So when I was watching that episode of Bosch, there was this moment where Bosch and Maddie are talking about who they suspect might be the killer. And so Maddie has this flash of inspiration and says, I think it's McKee. And when Bosch asks if there's anything off about him, she says, not really. He sneaks in through the back sometimes and mooches off our snack bar. And it just hit me because it seemed like such a Rigsby thing.
Rigsby thing to do, yeah.
Is that something they added since you were?
I don't know. It was in the original script. I think maybe just a happy accident. But I will say on that front, I immediately regretted the Rigsby eating decision. It was something that I thought would be a hilarious gag. Maybe, and when you're going into a show, you never expect that show will run for many, many years. Just for your own sort of sanity, you just say, okay, I'll shoot the pilot, and then if it goes any further than that, great. But then I realized about 2 years in that the eating as a character choice was a really regrettable one, because unfortunately there's no way to separate actor calories from character calories. So the more Rigsby ate, the bigger I got. And to be quite honest, it took a point where I was like, you know what? Let's have Rigsby be into salads now. I'm really cutting back. So I tried to make that my season 3, 4, 5 journey,
So you really did have to eat everything, because somebody had told me once that, oh no, actors, they take a bite and then they spit it out.
It depends. So, Rigsby, as you guys have already pointed out, he liked to eat. So, I committed, and I really did. In the pilot, and you have to bear in mind that this is someone who, was vegan for 7 years, vegetarian, not a big meat or fish guy. And in the pilot of The Mentalist, I think I had to consume about 5 or 6 lobsters because there's a
Oh,
lobster
that's
scene.
brutal.
And they very kindly had a sort of, you know, someone to the side of me to dispose of the lobster. But I did have a few later takes where I wondered whether that lobster was being upcycled. So I was like, is that just come from the shell and gone back into the shell? I mean,
Oh.
either way, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it was that was a painful memory from the pilot. No one should have to eat a amount of cold lobster.
Okay, so before we move on, I just wanted to make one last note that it's pretty cool that you got busted by both Bosches since Maddie cracked the case, and you were arrested by Ballard, and you were being tailed by Crate and Barrel. So you got a lot in
The
on a one
whole
short
9 yards,
episode.
didn't I? Yeah, yeah. I do feel lucky.
It's so funny that you keep just popping up on shows that I watch.
That's great. I love it. I mean, I think also when you've spent a long time in a particular genre, people feel, easy about casting you in that. So for a lot of people, I'm that guy from The Mentalist, and the beauty of being known for something is that it's always a pleasure to be able to play into that, but also play against it. So for all those people who knew me as nice, wholesome Rigsby, then it's nice to be able to show as an actor the versatility to be able to be someone completely different to that. I don't think Rigsby would find himself in a Jeremy McKee style, role very easily. So for me, that's part of the beauty and the challenge of the opportunity of acting, to be able to inhabit those different characters.
Well, I mean, there are people in the fandom who really feel like Rigsby should have been Red John, even though I don't agree with that.
It's funny. We had this conversation as a cast, and we went around and we were like, who would be the least likely in the audience's mind to be Red John? And I think we all universally agreed that it would be Rigsby, because I think that would have been the most like the sweetest, simplest guy, like just suddenly a criminal mastermind. But for a long time, we all thought it was going to be Patrick Jane. We all thought it was going to be some weird
Huh.
twist where he ended up being some sort of, nemesis
Multiple
that maybe there was
personality
some.
kind of thing.
Yeah, it was. I don't know why we thought that, but it was sort of compounded in later seasons by there's a dream sequence, or I can't remember it's exactly where Patrick Jane's tied up and you see Red John, and Red John's tormenting him, and he's kind of off camera, and the off camera was done by Simon. So that all got us thinking at the time, oh, I wonder if Red John maybe is some version of Patrick Jane. But in the end, it was it was McAllister, of course.
So I have one small question about Tracker. Are you related to the guy who played your younger brother? Because you guys really looked alike.
That's so funny. We both said that. No, we're not. We're not at all related. It was the first time I ever met him, and he was a really nice guy. And yeah, no, it's a happy accident, I guess. Just some good casting.
All right, so we've been already been talking about the Methodist, but let's move on to we have a whole set of Methodist questions to get through for you. To give you some background on me and Karin, I discovered the show last year. I couldn't get enough of it. I watched it 3 times all the way through. I became the moderator for the subreddit, and now I'm doing this podcast, this rewatch podcast with Karin, so I'm going through it a 4th time with her.
And I started watching the show from the beginning while the 6th season was airing. So
Oh,
I
wow.
knew just enough to avoid all spoilers for Red John. And then when I got to Bluebird, I watched it. I watched that episode 3 times. And then I started buying the DVDs and watching it all over from the beginning because it wasn't streaming anywhere yet.
Isn't that
So
funny? Now we're dating ourselves because we're talking about
yeah,
DVDs. If I
yeah.
if I say DVDs to my kids, they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Just
Yeah.
download it." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's when I know Daddy's getting old."
Yeah. So I was able to watch the 7th season live, and it was
That's
amazing.
so cool. Oh, thank you. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for supporting the show.
So back when you guys were on the show, how did you and the rest of the cast hear about what fans were saying and what they wanted? Was it mostly through the studio, or did you guys go and look yourselves on social media or things like that?
Oh gosh, no, that way madness lies. Never go and read the never go read the reviews. That's you're going to drive yourself mad doing that. It's interesting. When we started the show, social media even wasn't that big of a thing. Like I remember Twitter being in its maybe 1st or 2nd year, and someone from the studio had said to us, "We need someone to do social media," and everyone in the cast was like, "No, I'm good." And I said, okay, I'll do some Twitter, whatever that is. And at the time, Twitter was this really wonderful, wholesome place where people went and said nice things. Do you remember that? Just barely,
Yeah, yeah.
And and unfortunately, I think that has changed quite a bit. But at the time, it was just a wonderful way, and one of the first ways, really, that I'd ever been able to directly interface with fans and supporters. So it was all very positive, and it was all very lovely. And that, to me, was, I think, the first realization of the global impression that show was making. I remember I went with my wife to Montenegro, which is a beautiful but slightly random place to go. And we were hiking, and we were on the top of a hill, miles away from anywhere. And this local guy came up, and we were just looking out over the horizon and the ocean. And after about 10 minutes, he turned around to me and he went, "Rigsby?" And I was like, how random is that? That in the middle of nowhere, and a guy who didn't speak any English knew me as this character. And I remember thinking, it is incredible the power that television can have. To be every week in someone's living room, you almost end up feeling like in the best possible way, a piece of the furniture. And people are so familiar with you when they meet you because you're in their living room or their
Hmm.
TV room every day. So you sort of, sometimes that can be weird because people think that they know you and they don't. But I get a lot of, did we go to school together? I'm like, not unless you went to school in South Wales. So, but yeah, it was an interesting time to sort of feel the show's popularity come about because social media was not what it is today. It's just everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. It's very different now.
So after Red John storyline was wrapped up, we got this picture of Rigsby and Van Pelt's life and their blended family, and a lot of fans think that they took in LaRoche's dog, and just this great glimpse
Uh,
of their life. And I was just wondering if you had any input into that backstory after the CBI was shut down.
it's interesting. At a certain point, shows obviously they change. I think there was a feeling that towards the end of, I remember season 6 now, that they needed to sort of recalibrate almost and refine what the show could be, maybe our post Red John. And I think that was a challenge because Red John was so central to the drive of everything that Patrick Jane did. For me, it was, I was lucky enough to get offered a role in American Sniper. And I really, really wanted to try and sort of, after so many wonderful years on the show, pursue other things and just, see where that was going. And it was, at that time, it was quite clear that the show was probably going to be moving into maybe its last season. I fully supported the creative decision to sort of maybe try out what the FBI felt like. And as an actor in a relationship on TV, getting married is never a good thing. Never a good thing. Because, when you're married, it's basically TV death because no one really wants to watch people blissfully, happily married. It doesn't make for good television. It's so I think once you've sort of juiced that will they, won't they for a long time, it's time to find some new creative impetus, and I'm very proud of the show and I'm very proud of the way that we found a resolution for all the characters.
So, was there anything from Jane's skill set or scenes in the show that you learned while you were working on the show?
I learned to perfect how to make a really good cup of tea, which as a Brit is already a strong suit. It's funny, we worked with a few mentalists, real mentalists, and if there is such a thing. And that was an interesting learning curve. Like we'd have a couple of people would visit, and they were members of something called the Magic Castle. Are you guys familiar with what the Magic Castle is? Okay, so
No.
No.
if you ever go
Or
to
is
Los
it the thing
Angeles,
in LA?
it is, yeah.
Oh, I've
And
I've, I've never gone to it, but I've seen it. I've
it's quite it's quite interesting. It looks like a version of the Disney castle in Disneyland, but it's all for magicians. And so you have to be a member, I think, of the Magic Circle to go there. And we got invited a few times. And one of the consultants on the show was a real life mentalist who worked there. And he would come in and he'd teach us these sort of tips and tricks, but I wasn't very good at applying them. He'd be like, "Oh, it's all about mental persuasion. You just say certain words and it leads people this way and it leads people that way." Ask my wife. I've never been very good at persuading, so I I could come with a few of those tips and tricks, but they didn't seem to work for me. So yeah, it was interesting. I think for me, I got an awful lot out of working with our technical police instructor, Carl. He was a dear friend as well as a wonderful instructor on how to move with a weapon, how to be tactical, how to, one of my big bugbears when I watch a show is when you see an actor holding the gun the wrong way, or not moving in a tactical way. And those things to me are really important, because if you're playing a policeman or someone in the army or someone in the service, you want to do that justice, and you want to be as faithful as you can about it. So that was a really wonderful learning curve to go, and to be able to learn on the technical side of things.
It's a big pet peeve of mine whenever like law enforcement people on TV shows tuck their gun into their pants.
Oh. You see, I did that in Tracker, but not as a cop. You see, I think
Yeah.
that I
Right.
think low-life villains tend to tuck guns into the back of their underpants, whereas cops, that's not a thing. So
We're gonna have to watch the show, Karin. When we're gonna have to see if he actually does that. Just
yeah, in Tracker, you'll see when I'm about to beat my brother up, I actually slip it back into the back of my pants, and I guess they had a camera back there that I wasn't even aware of. So
one of these days, somebody's gonna shoot their butt, and I'll be very happy. I'll be like, "See, you don't do that."
So before you learned who Red John was, did you have any guesses?
there was
Yeah,
a
what was
few.
your guess?
It's funny, anytime someone had an extended arc, immediately people would begin to wonder, oh, I wonder if it's them. So I'm thinking LaRoche, that was a left field one, because we were like, oh, he's so establishment and he's so sort of straight down the line that it would actually be kind of genius. And then it got a little weird with what's in LaRoche's lunchbox and
Yeah.
the Tupperware. Like I can't remember if we had resolution on that or not, but several people have asked me about that. What was in the lunchbox? I don't know. And
It's a tongue.
it was a tongue, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Oh, goodness, it's so long ago. I remember it being weird.
Yeah.
Bertram was another one that we all thought maybe could have been up there. Who else? Like I said, we thought about maybe it was Patrick Jane. I'll be honest with you, I really, not for 1 second, suspected that it would be McAllister. But I guess that in a way is the beauty of it, because it's one of those things that when you've kept something going for that long, there's never going to be a perfect answer, is there? Some people are going to be like, oh, it's him, or oh, it's that person. But I think really it was more about what it gave to Simon's character at the end of it. So not that Red John wasn't important, but I think what was more important was the closure that it represented for Patrick Jane.
I say this all the time.
Yeah.
People always talk about, oh, Red John was so disappointing. I'm like, but it's not about Red John. It's about Jane. It's about
Yeah.
how the trauma affected him, and how he was able to close that chapter of his life. And I feel like a broken record at this point.
Well, no, and you're absolutely right. And Xander Berkeley, who played him, is a phenomenal actor with an incredible resume. Like, we were lucky to have such a varied and nuanced actor play that role. But again, every single time you had a notable guest, like I remember Bradley Whitford came in and everyone was like, "It's Bradley," And then when Eric played my love rival, there was a feeling that, oh, well, it has to be him now. So it was a sort of. I personally think that Bruno hadn't made up his mind and then sort of zoned in on it years later. But it makes for a much better story to say that you knew from the get-go. So I don't want to take that away. Maybe he did.
So in the pilot, Rigsby was originally named Wayne Gilzean. Am I saying that right? Well, that's a mouthful. It would have been harder, I think, for you. But what do you think his ship name with Van Pelt and Cho actually would have been with a name like that?
Oh my goodness! I mean, it's not particularly so. Wayne Gilzean apparently was a famous soccer player in the 1966 England World Cup winning team. This was the story I got from Bruno. I guess in the end, what happens, I don't know if you guys know, but what happens generally in names have to be cleared. So you have to go through studio clearance, and they do some sort of demographic search to make sure that there aren't a certain amount of those names registering. I don't know what the cutoff is, but if there is a certain amount of people who have that name, you can't use it. So I guess Wayne Gilzean got flagged, and Wayne Rigsby was born. So it's weird to me to think of anything other than Rigsby. I mean, Vanzine, like it's not good, is it, guys? It doesn't just trip off the tongue. It's it's like Rigsbelt. Yeah, I don't know if that's any better, but Chigsby, I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
In season 6, when Van Pelt is kidnapped and Rigsby goes to rescue with Jane, he gets shot in the chest, and
Yeah,
it looks pretty dire. Was there
yeah.
any of a consideration to kill you off at that point?
It's funny. I actually asked to be killed. Um,
Oh.
only because not in the kind of I want to leave way, not at all. It was more that it's just always more fun to go out with a bang. Do you know what I mean? And at that time, we knew that we were going to be working towards Van Pelt and Rigsby's happy ending. So
Yeah.
I was like, okay, on the one hand, walking off into the sunset. On the other hand, blasted in the chest, and in the conversations I had with Chris and Bruno, the producers, they were like, you don't understand, this is a really beloved character. If we kill him off in this very violent way, it's going to really upset people.
Yeah.
And whilst it might be a fun way, sort of from an acting standpoint, to give yourself some closure, I think we owe it to the people who followed this show for so many seasons to not maybe put that in the works. So, I think it was the right decision to have them. We journeyed with Grace and Wayne for so long from the pilot, and it needed that. It needed that resolution. It's for me. Looking back on it, it was the right decision. It was the right decision to make it more of a happy ending rather than a dramatic one. But to your point, yeah, it was a nasty. It wasn't just a flesh wound. That
Yeah.
was a really nasty, like 6 barrels in the chest. I have a photograph of me that I sent to my wife on that last day, and it's pretty horrendous. I'm going to have to send it to you guys because it looks like I actually said to the director, I was like, "How did I survive this?
That's funny.
This looks really bad, you guys."
And then you don't look too bad in the hospital either.
No, just chilling.
Yeah.
If nothing else, Rigsby's he bounces back.
So the most diehard Mentalist fans always hold out hope for some kind of reunion, but they're also well aware that Simon isn't interested in revisiting his past projects. But what exactly does it take for a reunion to take place that fans can see? Like, does a studio have to give permission, or is it just a matter of somebody getting you guys together, or what?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Many people ask me about that, and I think there's always a trend in Hollywood to want to sort of have another go round, or like, oh, I wonder. I think the show arguably could have gone on maybe for several more years. I think that
Mm.
for me, it's always about. I take The Office as an example of this, right? The British Office was a wonderful, wonderful show that only ran for a very limited amount of episodes. But in those limited episodes, it was perfect. And for me, like as a piece of television comedy, there is nothing I would have changed about that. And so sometimes less is more, and I know people are very, very nostalgic, and listen, I would love nothing more than to go back and work with those folks again on a show that was visible and beloved. It would be a dream, but I think you've got to ask yourself, what is the impetus for doing that creatively? Is there a story there? If there is a story to tell, great, but what is that story? So I think it's a little bit more than all of us just turning up and going, let's do this. Do you know what I mean? I think there has to be a sort of real pitch. There has to be then the need to sort of get everyone on board. And when you've run a show fundamentally about the pursuit of the central characters sort of getting closure, and that closure has been reached, what's the show after that? I guess is my honest question, and I think that would be the formative question. Is there a version of The Mentalist where Patrick Jane still has this burning drive to work with the cops after he's got that closure? That would be a creative decision well above my pay grade. But I would say this: I would work with all of those humans in a heartbeat. They were a joy to work with, and it was a very beloved project.
So work aside though, like would you be up for like doing some kind of like thing? You know, like how like during the pandemic, like casts were like getting together on Zoom and just having like a little chat session.
I mean,
Like, is that something that?
I socialize with Tim and Amanda very frequently. I don't see Robin so much. She's busy with family now, and Simon spends a lot of time back in Australia. In fact, he's just been filming with Amanda, funnily enough. They're on a new show
Yeah, and
together.
Scarpetta.
Scarpetta, yeah. So that's been really fun to reconnect and do a different project together. I mean, it's getting Tim and Amanda together would just be like another week for me. We hang out all the time. I see Tim a little less than I used to because he's in Hawaii now. And I don't blame him. Why would he want to come back? Every conversation I have with him is, I'm just going to head out on my boat. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm just going to head out into some traffic. So,
How did you get the part of Rigsby? Did you know anybody from the main cast already, or it is just something that came across your desk?
yeah, so I was the first person cast in The Mentalist, actually, even before Simon. And I
Oh,
had
really?
I had a talent holding deal with Warner Brothers, and at the time it was a sort of retention deal where they pay you and you agree exclusively to just look at projects that are coming through Warner Brothers. So The Mentalist was probably one of the last projects that had come to me in that period where I was trying to fulfill, projects that could interest me. And I read it and I thought, this is interesting. And at the time, you'll get a kick out of this, they were in conversations with Robert Downey Jr. And this was Robert Downey Jr. pre-Iron Man. So,
Wow.
at the time it was a very different Robert Downey Jr. And, he, phenomenal actor, obviously, and international megastar. But as ridiculous as it might sound now, at the time, the idea of him heading up a TV show wasn't out of reach. And then there was some discussion also about because he was still under an option with Warner Brothers at the time, David Schwimmer being the Mentalist.
Oh,
So that would have been a very different Mentalist. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not saying better or worse, but different for sure. And at the time, they had been unable to find their Patrick Jane. So I had got cast. There was some talk about if they couldn't find Patrick Jane, then they were going to maybe put the project on hold for a few more months until maybe the next pilot season. And then they started talks with Simon, and that's when things got very real. And at that point, when Simon was cast, it was a go project, with a known actor who they were very excited to have in the role. And thank goodness, because I honestly can't imagine another Patrick Jane. Simon was such a massive part of the success, and I think being able to get lightning in a bottle is when you put together personalities that, for whatever reason, they all just work in those roles. I think about some of the people that they were talking to play Rigsby at a time when I was negotiating the deal, and I look back on it. I'm not going to tell you who they were, but I look back on it now and think, oh, I wonder what they would have done with that role. But it's very specific to a moment, to a time, to certain people, and that energy, if you can capture it, that's what makes a hit show. But unfortunately, there's no way of making that into a formula, or we'd all be making hit shows.
Wow, so you can brag. I beat Robert Downey Jr. for this role.
Well, no, Robert Downey Jr. wasn't reading for Rigsby, and
Oh, okay.
pretty confident they didn't have him audition. But there were certainly talks, and how advanced those talks got, I have no idea. But boy, would have that changed things. He wouldn't have been able to do Iron Man. Like, it would have been a whole,
oh yeah.
show.
So I had seen Robin say in an interview that they worked 15-hour days. Is that the kind of schedule you had too?
Yeah, sadly, TV is it's very time consuming, and because we're packing so much into such a small period of time, so you shoot a whole episode in 7 days, and it's usually 6 days plus one. So you'll do catch ups and you'll do reshoots and you'll do maybe some post during that time for previous episodes. It's a lot. You're making a mini movie every week, so that means in at stupid o'clock, wrap until stupid o'clock. But these are good problems, honestly. Like, there was not a single day. I mean, my schedule, especially as the show got older and more sort of, became more of a machine. Tim, Amanda, and I were very lucky because we would probably be more used as and when. Simon was in every scene, so there was no escaping it for him. But they tried to make it up to him by allowing him maybe to leave a little bit earlier for Christmas or for breaks, just because the poor guy was in every day. When you are the titular character, that's a lot of time. And
Yeah.
and Robin probably, she was right up there because she was his main scene partner. So those guys did a lot of the heavy lifting.
So you must have had to be really vigilant about your schedule and getting a lot of sleep, because I was an extra on Lost for one day for 15
Okay.
hours, and that was so exhausting. I was like, how do actors do this every day?
They're grateful to be working. That's what it is. I think the bottom line is this: I love what I do. I really do. I love it with all my heart, and I can't imagine, finding anything else that I love as much as this. And so it never really feels like a chore to me. I feel so grateful to have a gig, and then if you're lucky enough to have that gig be a hit, it doesn't feel like work. Of course, it's tiring, it's exhausting, but the payback is these kind of conversations when you see the impression that the show has made. That's all you want as an artist, to be able to reach out, put something out there that resonates with people. That's a good feeling, and that's all the fuel you need.
Yeah, so we actually have a couple of voicemails from some of our listeners to play for you.
Okay.
And then if you're up for it, we have every week we have something called a Memory Palace quiz. So
Oh
we
wow.
have a special we have a special one
Are you going to
based
make me
around
flunk
Rigsby.
questions on the Mentalist? Okay, all right, I'm up for it. Let's do it.
It's a Rigsby specific quiz, so you got to do
Oh
good on it.
no! Why did you
You
do
gotta
that to
get
me, guys?
you gotta get at least one right, otherwise.
Okay, this is where we cut in here and make sure that I get them all right. Okay, because I'm going to make me look stupid in front of all the Mentalist fans.
All right, so I'm gonna play. This one is from Kat. She's in the UK.
Hi, Owen. The Mentalist has been my comfort show for almost 7 years and especially kept me sane during lockdown, so thank you so much for being a part of my favourite show. I was wondering, were there any aspects of Welsh culture that you introduced the cast and crew to, e.g., Bara Breath or Welsh cakes? Secondly, do you know why there was an episode that mentioned Liverpool Football Club so many times? Diolch yn fawr.
That's so funny. I don't remember that episode. I do remember having a lot of fun with an episode where Rigsby went undercover and he had to do a bad British accent. And I thought that was a wonderful, like, meta comedy moment there, where a British actor playing American, putting a British accent on and being told don't do the accent. That was a lot of fun. Did I consciously introduce? I think I brought some Welsh cakes in. They're kind of like drop scones with raisins in them, and the cast like that. Did I manage to work any other Welsh references in there? I think I had some pictures of my dog maybe in there. That was, we did a lot of silly stuff behind the scenes. Where at the time I remember I'd done a poster campaign for PETA, and it was one of those ones where the theme was I'd rather go bearskin than wear bearskin, and it was a protest about the use of bearskin for hats in Buckingham Palace. So the downside of it is that I had to take off all my clothes for the campaign, which I got no end of satisfaction of posting that campaign all over Tim's computer, so that every time he turned his computer on in character, there would be my Peter campaign there of me. He's like, I can't do this. I
Oh,
cannot
that's
be
so
looking at
funny.
you like this. So I tormented him with that frequently. But no, not too much Welsh stuff.
Okay, one more. Hang on.
Hi, this is maybe yes, but no. My question for Owain is, Rigsby ate a lot of food during his stint as a CBI agent. How does it work if an actor hates a particular food they're required to eat for a scene? In a case like Jane's, where he has a particular food, do they switch that up for you, or do they make you eat the Brussels sprouts that you hate? Anyway, love Rigsby, love The Mentalist. Thanks again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. They're very accommodating. I think if you have a specific preference or a food thing that you don't particularly care for, props, especially on the show, were always wonderful, very accommodating. So no, there was no force feeding. It was always sort of, even if it was a lot, it was done gladly and in character.
Okay, we're almost out of time, so we're gonna get to the quiz real quick.
Let's do it.
All right, Memory Palace quiz, Rigsby Edition. First question: what is Rigsby's area of expertise from his former squad?
Oh, he's an arson expert.
Yeah.
I got one.
Yeah, you got
Yay!
one. Woohoo!
All I wanted was just to not have a zero, so already I'm happy.
You're ahead. All right. What is Rigsby's father's name?
Oh, wait there. Stephen.
Oh yeah, you
Wait
got
there.
it.
No. Is it Stephen?
It's Steven, yeah.
Wait.
Steven.
Wayne Rigsby and... Or am I getting the actor's name? I'm naming the actor, aren't I?
No,
Who played
his name is Steven Rigsby.
Steve? It was
Yeah,
Steve?
yeah, you
Oh,
got it.
2 for
Woo,
2. Look
2
at that.
points. All right. See, question 3. In season 2, Bosco's team gave Cho and Rigsby Sesame Street nicknames. Which one was Rigsby?
Now, I know it was Bert and Ernie. I can remember the line. Why would I be mad? Bert's the handsome one. I'm Bert.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, you're doing really well.
Very mad at that. I was very mad.
Question 4. For the special flashback episode, Red Dawn, how did you change Rigsby's appearance to make you look younger?
I mean, I don't know if he looked younger, but he had a terrible goatee, which was all my own, and I messed my hair up a little bit. But yeah, it was definitely made me realise that growing a goatee is not for me.
Okay, question 5. This is our hardest question, so good luck.
Okay.
According to Cho, what song does Rigsby sing while drunk at Lisbon's anniversary party?
Oh. Is it a Sheryl Crow song?
No.
No. I don't know why. I don't know why I thought it was a Sheryl Crow song. Oh, this is going to be such a guess. No, I don't even have it. Go.
It's Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh, should have.
So I did want to ask because by some weird coincidence, the 3 of us are all the same age.
That's so funny.
So I don't know about you since you grew up in the UK, but when I was in high school, Wayne's World came out and suddenly everyone at school could sing that song. So is there a take of you singing that song at all? Or was that just
Have
part
you
of the
seen
script?
Bohemian Rhapsody? Mercifully not. No, I mean, I'm sure I'm singing it at home, but I can promise you any recordings are under thorough lock and key. No one needs to hear me butcher that song.
Okay, well, I mean, you did really good. You got 4 out of 5.
Oh man, it would have been nice to have had that clean sweep. But thank you for not showing me up. I
Well,
appreciate
thank
that.
you for being a good sport and taking it. I was actually kind of afraid you'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Not at all. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to see that I can remember most of him. You know.
Well, it was really fun talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
Anytime, my pleasure. Thank you so much, and thank you for that wonderful shirt. I'm going to have to go and make a version of it myself.
I'm wearing one too. I have a CBI shirt. I can't really see it.
Oh, you do? Oh my goodness, you guys have got the Mentalist swag. I love it. Good for you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So you just listened to our interview with Owain Yeoman from The Mentalist, who plays Wayne Rigsby. It's really exciting, right, Karin?
That was
Talk to
great.
the man himself. But we didn't actually get to ask him what our Spotify question of the week is, which is, would T-Rexes make a good taco filling? Because I thought it would throw him since he's the T-Rex guy. But yeah, so we're going to keep that as our Spotify question of the week. So if you're enjoying Rom-Com Detectives, be sure to leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. For our Spotify listeners, leave us a comment on our question of the week and tell us whether you think T-Rexes would make a good taco filling. If you'd like to join additional conversations about The Mentalist, you can visit the Mentalist subreddit at reddit.com/r/The Mentalist, and you can join the Mentalist Bookpin Discord server linked in the sidebar. To contact me and Karin, email us at hosts@romcomdetectives.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Threads, or Blue Sky at Rom-Com Detectives, or leave us a voicemail or text message at 1-650-733-XOXO or 9696. This episode of Rom-Com Detectives was recorded on May 15, 2025. Rom-Com Detectives Mentalist Unit is co-hosted by Crystal Watanabe and Karin Lubbers and is produced by Pico's House. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.